So we welcome all of you, my dear friends, to this extraordinary grand rounds being done by Professor Anthony, who is actually a head and neck surgeon. He is the head of unit in, he's a professor and head of unit in Madras Medical College. He happens to be my classmate. I'm proud to say that he's my classmate. And he's also one of the fantastic head and neck surgeons. And I'm sure you would have realized that last week in the last webinars. And this week we are coming with that series. And we will be doing, I think, larynx case today, Professor Anthony?
Hypopharynx.
Are we doing larynx?
Hypopharynx.
We are going to discuss a case of hypopharynx, CA hypopharynx. I'm sure that all the PGs all around and over to you, Professor Anthony, without much ado.
Thank you, Janagram. It's always a proud moment to
over to you
in the podium. In spite of your busy schedule and straining health,
I have some sore throat and fever. That's all.
Oh, yeah, that's what. No, in spite of all these things, you are coming and just for the sake of juniors, hats off. Siva, you unmute yourself. Siva, you are not you got to unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening, Siva. Are you ready, Siva?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can I share the screen? Share my screen, sir?
Please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
What happened, Siva?
Can I start, sir? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Siva, you can start your screen share.
Siva, can you share the screen?
usually look. Hello.
Madam. Hello.
Hello, sir. Hello, good evening, sir.
Siva, you can start.
Yes.
Dr. Sivasubramaniam, and the ENT field is slowly
Yes, sir.
turning into the female dominant field. Last year in our unit, actually in Madras Medical College, out of 30 first year PGs, 25 are females and only 5 of them are male. So Sivasubramaniam is the only male PG in our unit, and he is called our Talabadi because everything, the ward work, everything taking, teaching to the next level, everything comes with the, goes through Sivasubramaniam only. So let's welcome Sivasubramaniam and wish him best to present this case. Are you ready, Siva? Yes. What actually happens is the for MSPG, for an MS exam, piriform fossa growth is second important long case. First important is, of course, vocal cord growth. When you don't get a vocal cord growth, or when you get, we used to have about six people appearing for exam a day. We need minimum 4 long cases to 6 long cases. If that is the case, on the throat case, we'll keep 1 or 2 long cases as a ear cases, and other 2 or 3 long cases as the throat cases. So if you don't get 3 laryngeal growths, we'll go for hypopharyngeal growth. So usually an hypopharyngeal growth with a vocal cord fixity is a long case. If it is without vocal cord paralysis, we will keep it as the short case. Okay. So whenever you see a piriform fossa growth with a vocal cord fixity or a post-cord growth with a vocal cord immobility, we keep these cases as the long cases. Okay, so the examining is very, very important, that when you examine the patient, they will always see that how are you examine the case. So you got to do a proper indirect laryngoscopic examination, and if it needed, if they give you an option of looking inside with a video laryngoscopy, you should know a proper video laryngoscopy. Before examining the patient, you should inform the patient that what are you going to do, and see to that don't pull the tongue very hard, and don't make the patient wince. Try to examine the larynx well. Okay, so don't jump into looking for the findings, right? Whenever you look for the findings, see what are all the structures you see. You see a shortcut of your diagnosis, then look everywhere else. Look at posterior one of tongue, vallicula, epiglottis, area epiglottic fold. Then depending upon your case, whether it's a hypopharyngeal case or a laryngeal case, area epiglottic fold, laryngeal surface of epiglottis, false vocal cord, true vocal cord, then rhima glottis, posterior commissure, then subglottis. And then look for both sides piriform fossa and the post-cricoid area. So when you look into all these things, and note every finding what you see with them. So a patient who has got a laryngeal growth can have a cyst in the vallicula. So usually when you miss things like that, the examiner might think you have a clue regarding the diagnosis. Of course, everything depends upon how you present, how you have been there for 3 years, your training and things like that. In spite of that, the examination will be very pleasant if you are very sure that you are confident of what you are doing. So when you examine, you always keep in your mind that some corner of the place somebody will be looking at you. So don't try to, even though most of the times we would have shown you the cases, or you would have know what case it is, but still when you see a patient who have got a when you examine the patient, try to examine properly. For example, examine the neck. Other important things are always go with a stethoscope for your examination, because malignancy you got to look for secondary deposits in the lungs, and also auscultate the heart. So you will go say, I examine, there is no, without secondaries you present. The first thing they will notice is where is your stethoscope. And second thing is always look for a couch. So when you see the couch, just check it out, take the patient to the couch, make the patient lie down, palpate the abdomen. Without palpating the abdomen, you can't say there is no hepatosplenomegaly. And then try to palpate the skull and the spinal cord, the spines, because simple question to the patient with did the student examine your skull or examine your back, the patient will tell. At least you tell the patient in advance that what are you going to do, or at least tell the patient that you give an impression to the patient that you are examining these areas. So these are all the important small clues which will give you the better name when you are going to present. The presenting in the examination is the two-way communication. So when you talk, you got to answer loudly, confidently. If you don't answer confidently, even though if you answer, that is taken as a doubtful answer, and that image on you will come down. If you can answer like doubtfully for one or two cases, or with hesitation one or two cases, but you can't keep on answering only with the doubt. Okay. Second thing is the important point you should know is that examination is conducted. Hello. Examination is conducted only to check up whether the patient is whether you are managing the patient as they have managed in your institution. For example, if the patient who has got a pyriform fossa growth, when they do a surgery and you have an option of reconstruction, microvascular free flap, then it's fine. You can tell a microvascular free flap. When you don't have the facility, then you are always trying to do the patient with a tech major flap or any other local flap, right? So when there's a pyriform fossa growth with the laryngeal involvement, you do a total laryngectomy with partial pharyngeectomy and a flap reconstruction. You can't, when you don't have a facility, or you don't have experience in, or you don't have a habit of doing a microvascular flap in your center, then you don't give a answer as a microvascular free flap. What you do is expected from you. That is, when an external examiner comes to your place, even when you know that external examiner, even when you know that even if the external examiner has got a better answer for better management option for the case, external examiner want to know whether you know what is done in your center. It's not that what you know in, once he asked about what is done in your center, he will can always ask you about what is the ideal management, or what is, if these facilities are available, what will you do. But straight away you giving something which you don't have in your center. For example, you want to do a laser, you want to do a toss, or you want to do a toss, where you don't have a laser in your center, that will not look nice. So there, if they ask you any questions, you don't know the answer, you will get in. They will ask you why, and you will be in a fix. So you tell them what is done in your place. That's always safer, right? Rather than going by book, what is done in your center is an ideal thing to tell in an exam. Okay. Sriharsha, is it all right? What happened?
Sir, his system had some issues. He's logging through an alternate laptop, sir. So he's almost in.
I will try to check up.
Hello. Hello. Sorry, sir. My network
Uh,
is having.
Hello. Hello.
Dr. Shiva, we can hear you. You can go ahead.
Shiva, present, Shiva.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you. Shiva, I can hear you. Proceed.
Yes, sir. Can I start, sir?
Yeah, please, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, a 55 years old male, a farmer by occupation coming from Velur, came with the chief complaints of difficulty in swallowing for the past 3 months.
Okay.
Patient was apparently normal before 3 months. He then developed which was insidious in onset and progressive in nature, which is initially for solids and then later for liquids for the past 1 month. There were no aggravating or relieving factors. He has a history of foreign body sensation in throat for the past 1 month, a history of loss of weight and loss of appetite, history of left ear pain for the past 20 days.
Okay, Shiva, stop. Difficulty in swallowing is otherwise called
Dysphagia.
dysphagia. What's the definition of dysphagia?
So it's a defective transport of food and saliva from oral cavity to stomach.
Defect in the transportation of the food and secretions
Saliva. Secretions, yes, sir.
from the oral cavity to the stomach is called dysphagia. How do you classify dysphagia?
Grading,
Dysphagia.
so grading, grade 1 is for dysphagia for solids. Grade 2 is dysphagia. Grade 2 is dysphagia for semi-solids.
Okay.
Grade 3 is for liquids, and grade 4 is absolute dysphagia even for saliva.
Okay. So there is a classification according to Madras Medical College Professor Dr. Madana Gopal. He is a famous gastroenterologist, medical gastroenterologist. He classified dysphagia. It's called Madana Gopal's classification. That is according to the food what they take. When they have a dysphagia for chapati, that's called grade 1. For a solid, hard food. Grade 2 is for a food which can be made semi-solid like rice. Grade 3 is for food which are which are semi-solid by itself like kanji or smashed food. Grade 4 is for liquids. Grade 3 is it can take mild amounts of their own secretions. Grade 6 is an absolute dysphagia, they can't take anything. Okay, right. Usually dysphagia can be of oral causes, oropharyngeal causes, hypopharyngeal causes, or esophageal causes. Right. What is pain during swallowing is called what?
Sir?
Pain during swallowing is called what?
Odynophagia.
Odynophagia. Can you tell me some neurological causes for dysphagia?
Oropharyngeal causes.
Neurological causes.
Neurological. Sir, CVA, bulbar palsy.
Patient who got a bulbar palsy. Okay. Then can be a motor neuron disease. Right? So pseudobulbar palsy, bulbar palsy, progressive motor dysfunction. All these conditions will have a dysphagia. How will you diagnose them? What are the things you will look for?
Barium swallow. Initially,
On examination. For a bulbar palsy, how do you know it's a bulbar palsy?
associated cranial nerve palsy and motor
There
weakness.
won't be cranial nerve palsy, there will be a motor palsy.
Yes.
Only motor, the sensations will be normal. When you look at the tongue will get fasciculations. When the palate is not moving, tongue has got fasciculation. When the patient complains of dysphagia, always think of motor neuron disease. Okay. Then why the patient has got a foreign body? What is the first sensation, symptom in growth?
Early foreign body sensation in throat, irritation of throat during swallowing.
That is the first one. What is the ear pain is due to?
Sir, it's a It may be due to referotalgia because of the synapses of the nerve supply between hypopharynx and the EAC through the Arnold's nerve.
Arnold's nerve. What is Gallen's loop?
Sir?
Gallen's loop. There's an anastomosis in the piriform fossa between the recurrent laryngeal nerve and the superior laryngeal nerve. Okay. The superior laryngeal nerve has got a sensory part called the internal laryngeal nerve. Piriform fossa and the supraglottic area and the glottic area. The undersurface of the vocal and subglottic area is supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which has got a small sensory supply. So these two have got an piriform fossa is called a Gallen's loop. Okay. Next slide.
History of voice changes, no history of neck swelling, no history of difficulty in breathing, no history of neck stiffness and cough, no history of ear discharge or ear blocking sensation and hard of hearing, no nasal complaints for the patient.
Next slide.
Past history, he is not a known diabetic or hypertensive, no history of bronchial asthma, tuberculosis, COPD, thyroid disorders and epilepsy, and no other significant past history.
What are all the, in the past history, what are all the previous history you will ask for?
Sir, previous previous ENT surgeries.
Okay.
Any previous history of a foreign body ingestion.
Okay. Okay, we will come to that later. Present.
There is no significant family history. Patient was consuming mixed diet. He's a chronic smoker for the past 20 years and a chronic alcoholic for the past 20 years. Bowel and bladder habits are normal for the patient.
Smoker, why you ask for smoking history?
Sir, smoking and alcoholism is a major risk factor for hypopharyngeal and laryngeal carcinomas.
Okay.
Hence,
Things about the smoking and the hypopharyngeal carcinoma.
sir,
The age from which he started smoking is important. When the patient starts smoking early in the days, chances of hypopharyngeal carcinoma are high. And then air-dried tobacco is more dangerous than the flue-dried tobacco. And the cigarette is little better compared to that of the BD. Then second important thing is that you should know how many cigarettes and how many packs they smoke a day. So that depends. Then you should ask for whether the patient still smoking or stop smoking. Okay. If the patient stops smoking, the chances comes down. What is the chance for a smoker developing an hypopharyngeal carcinoma than a non-smoker developing an hypopharyngeal carcinoma? How many folds it's increased?
so it's more than 80% of chances for a smoker than develop non-smoker.
More than 8 folds increase. Not 10. 8 folds increase. Okay. Then, what about why alcohol causes cancer?
So usually alcohol, the first metabolic product is acetaldehyde, which will get accumulated and it inhibits the DNA synthesis and also inhibit the DNA repair mechanism. So it can also lead to cancer forms.
I don't want to learn all those things. That's why I become a surgeon. Then, that is alcohol is a solvent. Okay, so it has got an addictive effect when the patient smokes and takes alcohol. It all the solvents which are the local irritants are all getting dissociated and produces more injury to the glucosa. Right. Second important thing is when alcohol produces chronic nutritional deficiencies. That will cause the malignancy. Okay. Then, as you said, that there will be a repair in the DNA various deletion and additions in the genes produces problem. Okay, right. Then the alcohol and smoking together produces more problem compared with that of the alcohol or smoking alone. They have an additive effect. Okay, right. Next slide.
General
So
examination.
before going into the general examination, what do you think the patient has got?
Sir, some
History tells you what to look for where.
Sir, patient is having a progressive dysphagia and persistent symptoms for the past 3 months. Hence, it should be some growth should be there in hypopharyngeal region or post.
What type of growth? So is there a lesion? If there's a lesion, where is the lesion?
So it is of short duration and progressive symptoms. Sir. So
Can you go to the previous slide? That history of presenting illness? Yes. Okay. So what is the duration of foreign body sensation in the throat?
So he was having it for close to 2 months, sir.
Fine. Then the patient first develops dysphagia, then develops foreign body sensation in the throat. Okay. Is it right? Then he has pain for 20 days. Where do you think the pain is?
Sir, it should be in hypopharyngeal, piriform fossa.
Sorry?
There is a dysphagia and foreign body sensation, sir. So the growth should be in piriform fossa, most probably.
In the piriform fossa, which comes first?
Foreign body sensation should come first, sir.
You said only 2 months duration, but difficulty in swallowing is 3 months duration. So where the growth should be?
And it can be from post-credit growth. It should have extended to piriform fossa.
It is a it can be post-credit growth coming to piriform fossa. Is it? Okay. So it is usually dysphagia comes first. It's a post-credit growth. Okay, the patient has got no change of voice, no hoarseness. So it is very, very unlikely that it's a laryngeal growth or laryngeal involvement. Okay, if it is but still you should keep in your mind that it can still be a laryngeal growth, but you should concentrate more on the okay. So growth in the there's a question differentiating how will you by history differentiate a piriform fossa growth from the supraglottic growth. A supraglottic growth has got 2 types. One is the supraglottic proper and an epilaryngeal growth. Supraglottic proper growth is an infiltrating growth. There won't be any doubt between the supraglottic proper growth and the piriform fossa growth. It's an infiltrating growth. It almost behaves like a vocal cord growth. Okay, there'll be first starts with change of voice. Patient will go for hoarseness, and then patient will have a patient. It can go below, infiltrate. It can traverse the ventricle, can produce vocal cord fixation. Patient can go for stridor. That's a supraglottic proper growth. But outside growth is the huge big growth, which will look like it's an exophytic growth. And epilaryngeal growths are always exophytic growth. So when the patient, the symptomatology on a supraglottic growth with the epilaryngeal growth will be usually there will be a foreign body sensation and soreness of the throat. Okay. In a piriform fossa growth, it will almost look like a soreness of the throat, but here the soreness will be in midline. In the piriform fossa growth, usually will be on the right side or left side. Okay. Then slowly it will cause change of voice and dysphagia. So when you think of a hypopharyngeal growth, the growth, what is the first symptom? What is the longest symptom? The longest symptom is dysphagia. Always think of piriform fossa growth. Post-credit growth. If the soreness or a pain is the main complaint, or a neck node is the main complaint, think of piriform fossa growth. Okay, right. Next slide. So you have a short duration. So something which grows very fast. It's a hypopharyngeal lesion. Maybe it is from the post-credit area or it's from the piriform sinus. Maybe we suspect a post-cricoid problem comes to the piriform sinus. Okay, right. Next.
Examination. Patient is moderately built and poorly nourished.
What is build? What is nourishment?
So built is built states the chronic intake of nutrition, and nourishment tells us the acute shortage of nutrition.
Build is a long-standing nutritional deficiency. Nourishment is the recent nutritional deficiency. Okay.
No pallor, no icterus,
No
sign of,
pallor tells you what?
patient's there is no nutritional deficiency for that.
Is it a male or a female?
It's a male
Male
patient.
patient. A male patient, no pallor, it rules out a Patterson bone and there is a predisposition for the post-cricoid growth. Okay, then.
And no clubbing, no periledema, and no generalized lymphadenopathy. Patient was comfortable at rest and the vitals were stable. On ENT examination.
Don't you think this patient requires weight? Weight of the patient?
I should have,
Don't you see the BMI? The role of pallor is the patient who has got a cytopenic anemia has developed a post-cricoid growth and a tendency to form a post-cricoid growth. Okay. So the patient who has got a less BMI are more prone for pharyngeal carcinoma, hypopharyngeal carcinoma compared with that of the patient who got a normal or a high BMI. So a patient weight is important when you are presenting a piriform growth. Okay. Then
ENT examination, oral cavity, lips, angle of mouth, gums, and floor of the mouth, anterior two-third of tongue, vestibule, hard palates are normal.
have you not seen any nicotine stain?
Yes, sir. There were minimal nicotine stains here and there.
Any patches, white patches, red patches?
No, sir.
Nicotine patches or chronic smokers palate tongue?
There were nicotine patches here and there in the hard palate area. And multiple as well.
Right.
And in oropharynx, posterior one-third of tongue, anterior pillars, bilateral posterior pillars, and posterior pharyngeal wall are normal. Soft palate is normal, and uvula is normal and in midline. Indirect laryngoscopic mirror examination, base of the tongue, median glossoepiglottic fold, and bilateral lateral glossoepiglottic fold, bilateral epiglottis, and bilateral arytenoids looks normal. Bilateral true occult cuts are not mobile.
Hey, come on. You got so many folds.
Bilateral AE folds.
So many folds you told. Where the piriform fossa starts.
Start from superior bodies from the
pharyngoepiglottic fold. Did you tell about pharyngoepiglottic fold?
It's normal.
We can talk about glossoepiglottic folds, but pharyngoepiglottic fold are more important. The demarcation between the oropharynx and the hypopharynx. Okay, from the pharyngoepiglottic fold it starts. Okay, base of median lateral glossoepiglottic folds, bilateral radicula, epiglottis, aryepiglottic fold, arytenoids normal. Okay, not arytenoids normal. Okay, then bilateral true vocal cords. True vocal cord means you should talk about the false vocal cords also. Bilateral vestibular folds and the ventricular folds are normal. Right. Then
Slough covered the proliferative lesion present occupying the medial wall of a right piriform fossa, pushing the right AE fold, and the right AE fold looks bulky and pushed medially and obscured the full view of right vocal cord, and the lower extent of the tumor is not visualized. There was no pooling of saliva in the left piriform fossa, and
left piriform fossa. That's all.
Left piriform
Post-cricoid area.
The post-cricoid area is also appears to be free. There was no pooling of saliva in post-cricoid region and left
To
piriform.
examine the lower end of the inferior extent of the growth? Is it seen or not seen?
I couldn't see it in ideal examination, sir.
Okay. So when you describe the growth, you got to describe where the growth is. What is its surface? Is it slough covered or it is keratinized? Irregular.
Slough covered proliferative irregular growth.
Slough covered proliferative irregular growth. What about the edges?
Edges, it's averted.
It's an averted edges. Okay. What is its medial extent, lateral extent?
Sir, the medial extent is up to the arytenoid cartilage. The middle extent is up to the arytenoid cartilage.
Is arytenoid involved?
No, sir.
What is its superior extent, lateral extent?
The superior extent, it's up to the aryepiglottic fold. Lateral extent, it doesn't reach the lateral wall of piriform sinus. It's confined to the medial wall of piriform sinus.
Apex of the piriform fossa is involved or not?
I couldn't see it in ideal examination, sir. The lower extent of the tumor was not visualized.
Okay, show the video laryngoscopic finding.
Slough covered proliferative growth present occupying the medial wall of right piriform sinus, confined to the medial wall, and the right aryepiglottic fold appears to be bulky and pushed medially and obscuring the view of full view of the right vocal cord.
Is the arytenoid is involved?
There is no fixation of hemilarynx, sir.
Hemilarynx is mobile. Okay, so the surface of the arytenoid it seems involved. This is the growth arising from involving the apex of the piriform sinus. It involves the apex of the piriform sinus, and you can see there is a mild pooling of saliva above the growth. Okay, on the opposite side there is a mild pooling of saliva. Can you see here? Above the growth. Growth comes up to the off to just above the off of the, it starts from off or just above the off of the aryepiglottic fold, extends up to the level of arytenoids. Laterally, the lateral wall is free, but the growth occupies the medial wall of the apex of the piriform sinus. Okay, then the aryepiglottic fold appears bulky, obscuring the view of the both falls and the true vocal cord. Vocal cord are mobile. The glottis and the epiglottis appears. It's not completely obscured. Okay, it seems that both cords are moving, mobile. Opposite side piriform fossa is free. That means what? There is no pooling of saliva in the opposite side piriform fossa. That means what?
There should not be any growth in the post-cricoid region.
Usually there is no obstruction or growth in the post-cricoid region. Okay, right. So this looks more like the piriform fossa growth. Okay, then next slide.
Examination of neck, the laryngeal contour appears normal. Laryngeal crepitus present. Trachea appears to be, trachea is in midline. There was no stridor, no palpable lymph nodes, and no dilated veins.
What is laryngeal crepitus? What are the components of laryngeal crepitus? What is Bocas?
Bocas sign is absence of laryngeal crepitus is Bocas positive, sir.
Okay.
There are two components, thyrovertebral and cricovertebral components. Thyrovertebral is produced by the posterior border of thyroid cartilage along the transverse process of spinal cord. Vertebra.
Vertebra. Okay, not spinal cord. Right. Then the main component is the cricovertebral. Cricovertebral crick is due to
produced by the lamina of cricoid cartilage over the body of vertebra.
Body of the vertebra. So the Laryngeal crepitus has got two components. One is the main component is the cricovertebral clip, where the posterior border of the posterior surface of the lamina of the cricoid grades with the body of the corresponding cervical vertebra. And thyrovertebral clip is the posterior border of the thyroid cartilage with the transverse process of the vertebra, corresponding vertebra. But unilateral absence of thyrovertebral clip is seen in
Unilateral piriform fossa growth or piriform.
piriform fossa growth. There can be a unilateral loss of. Okay, right then. What in the piriform fossa growth, particularly a lateral wall of piriform fossa growth, what else you see?
So neck swelling.
Where all you can have the neck swelling.
Sir, lateral to the thyroid cartilage, superior to the thyroid cartilage, thyroid
Superior to the thyroid cartilage. What is the place is called? Some membrane.
The thyroid membranes.
Thyroid. That's called the extralaryngeal spread from the piriform fossa. Typically, when you see the lateral wall of the piriform fossa growth, it can present outside as a lump, where it comes out through the thyroid membrane. Okay. Absence of laryngeal crepitus is called Broca sign. Okay. Then you okay. So how will you differentiate that from the palpable lymph node?
Sir, swelling arising from inside moves with deglutition.
The growth coming out will move with deglutition. Node usually doesn't move with deglutition. Okay. So what are the boundaries of piriform sinus?
Sir, superiorly pharyngoepiglottic fold. Inferiorly, its apex cricopharyngeus muscle. Lateral and medial borders, medial boundaries will be upper membranous. Its lateral boundary is formed by the thyroid membrane. Medial boundaries by array epiglottic fold. Lower cartilaginous part, lateral boundaries by thyroid cartilage, and medial boundaries by cricoid cartilage.
So you basically divide this into a superficial, deeper apex. I mean the lower down apex of the piriform sinus. The the shallow part is down medially by the area epiglottic fold, laterally by the thyroid membrane and the thyroid cartilage. Superiorly, it is bound by the it starts from the pharyngoepiglottic fold. Inferiorly, there is a paraglottic space. Posteriorly, it opens inside the pharyngeal lumen, and inferiorly it communicates with and it continues down as the apex of the piriform sinus. Apex of the piriform sinus is bound medially by the cricoid cartilage and laterally by the thyroid cartilage. Okay, this is the boundary. So if the apex of the piriform fossa comes out, how it will come out?
Sir, when the patients say, we ask we ask the patient to say E and the piriform fossa, apex of the piriform will show.
What?
So when we ask the patient to say E during the video,
No. The lateral part of the shallow part comes out through a thyroid membrane. How it will come out?
cricothyroid membranes.
Through a cricothyroid membrane. It's a triangle called cricothyroid triangle. What are the boundaries of cricothyroid triangle?
Sir, inferior border is formed by cricoid cartilage. Medial border is formed by the medial cricothyroid ligament, and lateral boundary is formed by lateral cricothyroid ligament.
Right. Cricothyroid muscle, cricothyroid membrane, and the thyroid cartilage.
Yes.
Okay, that forms a triangle called a cricothyroid triangle through which it comes out. Okay. So particularly when there's a paraglottic space involvement is there, through which it can come out. So a piriform fossa growth can anterior when you prick the piriform fossa with a pin, where it goes is the paraglottic space. Okay, why paraglottic space is important in the piriform fossa growth?
Paraglottic space, posterior boundary is formed by the piriform sinus, mucosal reflection of the piriform sinus. Hence, any piriform sinus growth can invade the paraglottic space and causes an vocal cord fixation, cricoid nut joint fixation, or muscular invasion, and cause vocal cut fixity and producing a stridor.
Where is the paragallic space in the cricoid neck joint? It is sitting over the cricoid neck joint. Cricoid tumor and the apex of the piriform fossa tumor. So, space involvement is two things will happen. First thing is the early involvement of the thyroid neck muscle producing vocal cut fixity. Second one is it can the paraglottic space extends from the apex, the superior boundary of the paraglottic space is the area epiglottic fold. So inferior boundary of paraglottic space is apex of the piriform sinus. Superiorly medial boundary is inferiorly by the conus elasticus. So a tumor which involves the paraglottic space will involve all three zones of the larynx. So once the paraglottic space is involved, you are not sure that which place you can stop. So horizontal partial laryngectomies are ruled out. The epilarynx will get involved when the paraglottic space is involved. So you got to do something big. That's why when the periepiglottic space or the paraglottic space is involved by a tumor, you can't restrict your surgery into a very small area. Okay, you got to go for bigger areas. Okay, so that is the other important thing about the piriform fossa growth. Okay, then when the patient has got a cartilage invasion, what other finding you will look for?
Pain,
The cartilage invasion. What do you look for?
tenderness over the cartilage.
Tenderness over the cartilage. That shows what?
Perichondritis or a tumor invasion by
Tumor invasion will produce little amount of inflammation causing perichondritis. So patient will have tenderness when you palpate the cartilages. What is that? Why you bother about that?
Sir,
Not tenderness. What will happen to your inference?
sir, if the cartilage is getting involved, we should do surgery. We cannot afford radiotherapy alone.
Why?
The tumor will run. Cartilage necrosis will happen when we give the
Perichondritis will, mild inflammation involvement will produce perichondritis. So once the patient has got perichondritis, you give a radiotherapy, patient will cause radionecrosis of these cartilages, produces cartilage abscesses. You can't proceed with your radiotherapy, and it makes the treatment messy. So always cartilage invasion, perichondritis, you don't give radiotherapy. You will straight away go for some surgical management. Okay, right. So you should always palpate for laryngeal cartilage tenderness. Okay, then right. How will you look for stridor? What is the earliest sign of stridor?
Sir, noisy breathing during sleeping,
Sleeping, noisy breathing.
snoring.
That is bilateral pressure pulse, not unilateral. You palpate
Yes.
or put a step. So first thing is, before patient emitting the sound, you can palpate and you will have, you will see the turbulence, or you will feel the turbulence or hear the turbulence with a stethoscope. That's the earliest way of diagnosing impending stridor. Okay, what is stridor?
Auditory perception of vibratory airflow through the constricted airway at the level of larynx.
It's called stridor. Okay, it is rise in the oropharynx. What is it called? Strutter. Okay, right. So no palpable lymph nodes. What is the percentage of lymph node involvement in the case of a piriform fossa growth?
Level 2, it's about 58%. Level 3 is 42%. Most common is level 2 and level 3 is most common lymph nodes involved, sir.
Usually it comes up to 70%. What is the percentage of on the opposite side?
Less than 10%.
5%. 5% of the tumor can have a contralateral node. What does that mean? The patient has got a contralateral node. What happened to the staging?
Sir, it's the
Node on the opposite side, positive node.
nodal staging will increase if all nodes less than 6 centimeters, it will be N2C if bilateral or contralateral nodes.
N2C is what?
Sir, contralateral or bilateral node?
No, what stage it? What stage it is?
Sorry, N2 stage 4 A, sir.
So this will make this will upstage. So a pyrethrum fossa growth, you should always be careful, palpate on the opposite side or investigate for the opposite side of node to see that what stage it is. So what's your diagnosis?
Sir,
What's your diagnosis?
sir malignant growth hypopharynx, subsite is right piriform sinus, tumor.
Show me your diagnosis slide. Okay, malignant growth hypopharynx, subsite right piriform T2N0MX stage 2. Okay, fine. Why do you say this growth is malignant?
Wise.
You say
And,
it is malignant.
appearance of the growth is proliferative and slough covered.
Always, your diagnosis should be depends upon your examination findings, not depends upon the history. You don't go and tell an examiner that he is a smoker, he is an alcoholic. Every possible, and he is old. Every possible of your examiner can be a old, can be alcoholic, can can take alcohol, can smoke. That will pick his ego, and he will not agree. He might say, for example, if I might say, no, I am old, I take alcohol, I smoke, do you think I have cancer? But unfortunately, when you are sitting in an examination, you can't tell them, yes, every possibility you can have if you have all those things. But you can't tell that, right? If your patient comes and asks me, doctor, I take alcohol, I smoke, I am above 40, do I have a chance of getting an hypopharyngeal cancer? You will always tell them, yes, you have. Better you stop. But you can't tell that to an examiner. So always your examination findings are very important compared with that of the what do you see? So what are the points to tell this growth is malignant? Or what are the points which is missing to tell this growth is malignant?
First, history-wise, there is
no history. Clinically.
The clinical appearance of the tumor, it's a proliferative growth.
Okay, forget about the appearance of the tumor. Anything else? Then you say the tumor is malignant. One is appearance. Second one is come later.
Sir?
Appearance will come later.
Okay, sir. If there is a node,
there's a node. A single node will decrease the prognosis of a patient by how many %?
50%, half the prognosis will decrease.
One third. If you palpable node, without the node, what is the prognosis will come 1/3 down when you have a node. So a node, a malignant node will say, a secondary deposit will say this is a malignant node. Deeper infiltration, perichondritis, cartilage invasion, extralaryngeal spread, or a deeper fixation produces vocal cord fixity. All these things will tell you the patient is got a malignant growth. So what is an appearance which will tell you this patient? Why you say this is a malignant growth?
Here the tumor looks proliferative and slough covered. The margins are averted. Hence,
you like to tell this growth is a proliferative growth or a exophatic growth or an infiltrative growth?
Infiltrating. Usually, hypopharyngeal carcinomas are exophatic and proliferative only, sir.
Usually it is what happened to his pericardic fold? Why it got widened?
It looks bulky. It could be infill.
Why? That's an infiltration, right? I don't agree this is the hypopharyngeal growth.
So patient is having dysphagia and foreign body sensation.
This is main epiglottic fold, medial wall of the epiglottic fold. You don't have any other place to confidently tell the pyrethrum fossa is involved, right? Can this be marginal zone growth? This can still be a marginal zone growth, but I don't agree. This is the pyrethrum fossa growth because main bulk of the tumor is the pyrethrum sinus. If the tumor is sitting on the epiglottic fold, then it's a marginal zone growth. The growth is sitting on the epiglottis, then it's a marginal zone growth. The main bulk of the growth is in the pyrethrum sinus. So it's probably it's a pyrethrum sinus growth. And then the patient is also complaining of dysphagia. Why this patient is complaining of dysphagia?
Sir, mechanical obstruction during swallowing.
One side. One side only, no.
Yes, sir.
The patient is having dysphagia because it involves the apex of the pyrethrum sinus. And the apex of the pyrethrum sinus, proliferative exophatic growth, when the patient tries to swallow, can descend down and obstruct the post-cricoid area. Okay, what are the boundary of post-cricoid area?
Sir, anteriorly posterior lamina of thyroid cartilage. So superiorly by the posterior surface of arytenoid and interconnecting mucosal folds. Inferiorly by the lower border of cricoid cartilage.
Hypopharynx. Okay, so it's a strip of mucosa except from one arytenoid to another arytenoid, or when the vocal cord is in the cadaver position, from one arytenoid to the other arytenoid, from the level of the arytenoids to the level of the lower border of the post-cricoid area. What is the boundaries of posterior pharyngeal wall growth? Posterior pharyngeal wall of hypopharynx.
Sir, superior border is along the superior border of hyoid bone or flora flalicula. Inferior border is along the inferior border of cricoid cartilage. Lateral limits is formed by two imaginary lines drawn along the long axis of vocal cord when it's in cadaveric position, intersecting the posterior pharyngeal wall.
Laterally?
Lateral boundary is formed by when the two vocal cords in a cadaveric position, imaginary line will be drawn along the long axis.
The lateral boundary continues that of the pyrethrum sinus. That of the posterior pharyngeal wall of the oropharynx. And demarcated by the imaginary line joining the base of the vallicula or at the level of an hyoid bone. Okay. So this is about the posterior pharyngeal wall growth. Okay. If I put a tongue depressor and I could see the growth. This, if I could see what growth it, how do you classify that growth? Huh?
Posterior pharyngeal wall growth will be seen when we put the tongue depressor and see.
So any growth on the posterior pharyngeal wall which is seen when you put the tongue depressor is called a posterior pharyngeal wall. When you see the growth only with the indirect laryngoscopic examination behind the arytenoids, then it is called
post-cricoid growth.
Post-cricoid growth. What are all the signs of pyrethrum fossa growth? What are the signs of post-cricoid growth? What is Jackson's sign?
Sir?
What is Jackson's sign?
So pooling of saliva in pooling of saliva.
In a case of a post-cricoid growth, pooling of saliva is called Jackson's sign. Okay. So what? So this most probably malignant growth, hypopharynx, most probably from the pyrethrum sinus, without involvement of the larynx. Okay. So how will you investigate the patient?
Sir, first X-ray soft tissue neck AP lateral, video laryngoscopy and biopsy, CCT neck from skull base to diaphragm.
Video laryngoscopy and biopsy. That is what you do, but what you tell in the exam.
Video laryngoscopic examination, then direct laryngoscopy and
direct laryngoscopy and
to look biopsy. To look the also we can look the lower extent of the tumor through direct laryngoscopy.
What is direct laryngoscopy?
Sir, patient.
What is direct laryngoscopy? It's an instrument to look in
Larynx.
Larynx. What are you looking here?
Hypopharyngoscopy.
Is there a, what do you call that scope as?
Hypopharyngoscopy.
Otherwise, it's called a upper esophageal speculum. Upper esophageal speculum to look into the pyriform sinus. Okay, what anesthesia will do this?
General anesthesia for visual we can give local anesthesia, sir. Local anesthetic spray.
Copy?
Anesthetic spray for hypopharynx we should give general anesthesia for the patient.
Can you give a general anesthesia for this patient? Can you intubate confidently?
Yes.
You can intubate, and then you put only a general anesthesia. Why?
Sir, because when we introduce the direct laryngoscope, the patient may go for vagal stimulation and cardiac arrest. So we should use general anesthesia.
No, the other name of hypopharyngoscope is upper esophageal speculum. Pyriform fossa block we generally don't give when the patient has got a pyriform fossa growth, because you will be injuring the growth and it will start bleeding. You can't examine correctly. So it's always preferable to do it with the general anesthesia in a pyriform fossa growth. Okay. So with a pyriform fossa growth with an upper esophageal speculum, you got to see the extent of the tumor. So how do you check up whether the larynx is involved or not?
Sir, probe test we can use a
Probe test. So you can't do the probe test under local anesthesia. Very difficult. Before doing a under general anesthesia. Okay. Why you want to check for the probe test?
to ensure there is no cricoarytenoid joint involvement, cricoarytenoid joint fixation.
This joint, this is moving.
Now here is moving, sir.
Yeah. Then why you want to check? I'm talking only about this patient. You are not sure about the involvement of the you are not sure about the involvement of the pipe of areoepiglotic fold, right? The medial side of the areoepiglotic fold is supraglottis. So you want to check up whether there is any infiltration on the supraglottis. Why do you think that areoepiglotic fold is bulky?
Due to infiltration of the tumor.
Tumor of what?
Tumor of pyriform fossa.
Sure. Pyriform fossa. Wall. What is the wall of the pyriform fossa?
Sir?
Medial wall of pyriform fossa?
Sir, superior, at the superficial part, it's areoepiglotic fold.
What is the areoepiglotic fold is?
It's made of thyroepiglotticus muscle, continuation of the thyroarytenoid muscle.
Areoepiglotic fold is the upper border of some ligament. What ligament is that? Some membrane. What membrane is that?
Membrane.
Huh?
Quadrangular membrane.
What? Quadrangular membrane. Okay. It's a upper part of the quadrangular membrane forms the areoepiglotic fold. Okay. The quadrangular membrane forms the medial wall of some other paraglottic space. So once the paraglottic space is involved, what happened to that areoepiglotic fold?
It may look.
It appears bulky. So you want to double check whether the paraglottic space is involved or not. Okay, so you palpate, you will know. How will you for sure tell you whether the paraglottic space is involvement or not? What investigation will tell you?
CCT neck from skull base to diaphragm. We can confirm.
Which cut you will see paraglottic space? The level of?
The level of vocal cuts.
Sure. The level of false vocal cord.
False.
The level of false vocal cord. That's the place, the false vocal cord is the lower boundary of your quadrangular membrane. Upper boundary is the areoepiglotic fold. Place you should look for the involvement of this tumor. Okay, so you check it up at the level of the false vocal cord. Then you will see. Okay. If we are not confident that whether the paraglottic space is involved or not. Why? When will you confidently say the paraglottic space is involved?
There is no hemilarynx. If there is a hemilarynx fixation, we can surely say that.
Yes. So whenever there is a paraganglic space involvement, it usually causes fixation of the hemilarynx. I mean, fixation of the vocal cords. Vocal cord is freely mobile. It doesn't mean that the paraganglic space is not involved, but patient can go in for a paraganglic space involvement very soon. So you got to start treating the patient early. Okay, right. So you do a direct, you do a upper esophageal speculum examination, look for the pyriform fossa and take biopsy. Okay, what do you think this biopsy report will be? What is the lining epithelium?
Stratified, non-keratinous stratified squamous epithelium.
Non-keratinous stratified squamous epithelium. So what will be the, this tumor looks like? What will be the biopsy report?
Probably squamous cell carcinoma. Most common is squamous cell carcinoma.
Why you want to take a biopsy?
Sir, I want to prove whether it's a benign or malignant lesion.
Want to see whether it's a benign or malignant lesion because the patient doesn't have any, except it appears, doesn't have any cause for fixation, fixation, cartilage invasion, or node. So it can still be a benign tumor. You want to take a biopsy to check up whether it is a benign or malignant. Then, if it is malignant, what do you want to know?
Type of tumor, malignant tumor.
Sorry?
Type of the malignancy. Squamous cell type of the malignancy.
Type of malignancy. Why type of malignancy is important?
Squamous cell, the treatment will be different for squamous cell and sarcoma.
Treatment will be different. So, with the patient who has got a hemolysis, it can be a neomyom,
Yes, sir.
or it can the patient can have an aneocystic carcinoma, adenocarcinoma, things like that. So you want to know the type of malignancy. Then what else you look for?
Differentiation of tumor.
Differentiation. Why differentiation?
It also tells that there is treatment protocol will be different for.
Is it?
No, sir. Anaplastic. The grade 4 will. We can give only palliative therapy only.
Is it? Sure. A small tumor less than 2 centimeter involves only on one subside. It's undifferentiated carcinoma without neck node. And you have other side, you have another patient who have a small tumor, well differentiated carcinoma. For one tumor, you give a curative treatment, other tumor, you give a palliative treatment. Is it? Then why? The differentiation will tell you the possible prognosis. Undifferentiated carcinoma or an anaplastic carcinoma is adamant, it might come back, even though it is small. But well differentiated carcinoma is a little soft, so you can treat it effectively. Okay, so that differentiation, how do you say differentiation? What is classification?
Sir?
Broadest classification.
Grade 4 grades, sir. Grade 1 is well differentiated. 0 to 25% cells will get differentiated.
0 to 25% cells are?
Cells will be well differentiated from.
75% of the cells are well differentiated cells. Okay, 25% of the cells are not differentiated cells. That's called well differentiated. If it is up to 50%, it's called moderately differentiated. If it is up to 20%, it's called poorly differentiated. It's less than 25%, you call an
undifferentiated or undifferentiated.
Okay, so this will give you the prognostic value. It doesn't give you it don't change the treatment protocol. Treatment is always depends upon tumor, not depends upon stage, not depends on differentiation. Okay. Then what do you think what other investigations you do?
Barium swallow.
Barium swallow for what?
Sir, to rule out esophageal extension or any pathology.
Why esophageal extension?
Sir, submucosal spread is more common with the
how much it will go submucosally?
Sir, from pyriform fossa, it will be around 5 mm.
5 mm. You can go submucosally up to 5 centimeter. You can Hypopharynx. So you should always differentiate that. And the second one is 5% of the head and neck malignancy squamous cell carcinoma will have a second primary. You should rule out the primary of the lower third of the esophagus. Third one is you should assess the esophagus. Why?
Skip lesions. There should not be any skip lesions. If there is any skip lesions.
Skip lesions. Okay, there should be skip lesions. 5% of the patient has got a second primary. So you got to always check up esophagus. You can do a direct, you got to do a OGD-scopy, or at least you should take a barium swallow. Okay. Then another important thing is this patient has got an involvement of the apex of the pyriform sinus. If you are planning for surgery, when you take a barium swallow, you should look the fluoroscopy. So look the fluoroscopy for the movement of the larynx. One of the contraindication for surgery in the hypopharyngeal growth, particularly a postcricoid or a posterior pharyngeal growth, is fixation to the prevertebral muscles. The prevertebral muscle is involved. When the patient swallows, the larynx will not go up and come down. That you can examine exactly when you are doing a barium swallow under fluoroscopy. Look for the movement of the larynx. Okay, so that is very important when you are thinking of surgical management. These are all the complementary factors of the barium swallow. Any other X-ray you will take?
Chest X-ray PA view.
Why chest X-ray?
So to rule out the position of the trachea, widening of mediastinum.
Widening of mediastinum?
Any mediastinal, supramediastinal nodes involvement.
So when there is a level 7 node is involved, there will be a widening of the mediastinum. Then
to rule out the second primary and secondaries.
Second primary, secondaries, okay.
Aspiration pneumonitis and
aspiration pneumonitis, okay. Anything else?
Anesthetic fitness.
Anesthetic fitness, okay. Anything else?
Trachea position.
What?
Trachea position.
Trachea position, you take X-ray, soft tissue capillary. Then he has told already secondaries, second primaries and secondaries.
Secondaries, there will be.
There is a first answer comes from Madras Medical College, particularly from our unit. You are not going to treat the patient one time. You are going to treat the patient lifelong. You are going to follow up the patient lifelong, minimum 5 years to a maximum of 20 years. So every time you need a pilot film, a film X-ray, you got to take an X-ray and then keep it with you so that you look for all the shadows there. After 5 years, after 2 years, you take an X-ray just for a cough and you see a gingivos, or you see a coin shadow. You want to check it up whether the shadow was there pre-treatment. So the pre-treatment X-ray is always required to compare with that whatever happens in the future to rule out a secondary or a second primary. So that's called a pilot film. So every time you take an X-ray, and keep it with you. It may be an X-ray or it may be a CT chest. Okay, that findings you should be very careful. There may be a calcified node because of the childhood tuberculosis. So when you see it after some time, it can be just mistaken for the other lesions, particularly secondaries. So when you go back and see if it is there already 2 years back, you are not bothered. If it has come recently, you got to investigate for that. So for that, you got to take a pilot CT scan or a pilot chest X-ray. So pilot film, secondaries, second primary, aspiration pneumonitis, then these people will be on an immunocompromised station, so they can have associated tuberculosis. Look for a cavity. If there's a tuberculous cavity, look for any fungus inside the cavity for cardiac purposes and the anesthetic fitness. For all these purposes, you got to take a image the chest. Okay. Then, what other investigations you do? So will you do anything else?
MRI neck.
MRI neck. For what?
So it will differentiate the soft tissue edema and growth. Pre-orbital facial involvement.
For what? This patient is clean, man. It's only a small tumor, T2 tumor, and there is no CCT neck will take secondary notes or not.
Sir, the epiglottic fold looks bulky, sir. We should rule out
Hello?
paraglottic space involvement.
You don't see paraglottic space involvement with your CT scan, is it? Okay, take it. We do an MRI neck. Then, what other investigations you do? So it comes as a well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma or moderately differentiated squamous cell carcinoma, and there is a minimal paraglottic involvement. What do you do?
Sir,
What will you do to the patient?
routine blood investigation.
What's your plan?
Radiotherapy, single modality curative radiotherapy,
Single modality curative radiotherapy or
voice preservation surgeries.
want to do some surgery for this patient? How will you remove the paraglottic space? Otherwise, what are all the indications for surgery in a pyriform fossa growth?
Sir, if it's hemilarynx, dysfunctional larynx with
Dysfunctional hemilarynx fixation, you will do. Then
tumor limited to lateral wall of pyriform sinus, we can do lateral pharyngotomy and partial pharyngotomy.
only tumor limited to the lateral wall of the pyriform fossa. Okay, yes, agreed.
Tumor involving post-cricut region and tumor less than.
We'll come to that later. We will discuss only about the pyriform sinus tumor.
Early stage tumor less than more than 4 centimeter from mobile fixed vocal cord, thyroid cartilage invasion and skin infiltration.
Thyroid cartilage. So basically you classify this into a tumor factors. Tumors which are all contraindicated for surgery. A tumor which are all you do surgery because you do surgery for something else, in continuity resection. Last one is because the tumor, the main modality of treatment is surgery. So these are all the headings under which you will operate on a pyriform fossa growth. Okay. So for a growth point, a tumor volume is more than 4 centimeter. That is only mainly used for laryngeal cancers. When you see a tumor which is a vertical length of the tumor is more than 5 centimeter and it's bulky tumor, very, very unlikely the tumor will get treatment with the radiotherapy alone. So for the tumor, you have two choices. One is go for surgery or you do a chemoradiotherapy. Give a chemoradiotherapy with the two arms. First arm is you give anti-day chemotherapy. Along with that, you give 10 cycles of radiotherapy. Then reassess the tumor. See that whether it's a responders or non-responders. If you are not responders, you can think of surgery. Okay. Or a patient who has got a so this the vertical length of the tumor is more than 5 centimeter. You can always think of surgery. Okay, then a patient who has got a mobile neck node, think of surgery. A cartilage invasion, perichondritis. So these are all the patients you can't give a radiotherapy. Other one is the radio-recurrent growth and a residual growth. These things you don't think of surgery, you don't think of second time curative option with your radiotherapy. So you go for palliative radiotherapy or you think of surgery for the patient. Okay, then other malignancies like adenoid cystic carcinoma, sarcomas, they don't respond well with the radiotherapy. Neuroendocrine carcinoma, then you think of surgeries. Various modalities are available. When you do a lateral pharyngotomy, you can do a supraoid pharyngotomy and try to remove the tumor with conservative surgery of the larynx. You can do reconstruct with the primary closure. You can put a microvascular free flaps. You can put a tech major flap. Whatever it is. Okay, these are all the various modalities of available. But for this patient with a given modality, main line of treatment is radiotherapy. Right. So the indications for surgery are
Tumor size more than tumor length
vertical width more than 5 centimeters. Then vocal cord fixation. Then you have a tumor which has got a
Cartilage
like node, radiorecurrent growth, radioresidual growth, perichondritis, cartilage invasion, and then other type of malignancies. For all these tumors, you think of surgery. But this is a well differentiated or moderate differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. Main line of management is single modality radiotherapy. How much rats you give? What type of radiotherapy?
Curative therapy, we can give like 66 to 70 grays of radiation in divided 1.8 to 2 grays per day per fraction dose for 5 days a week for up to 7 weeks.
Why you want to give only 5 days?
Sir, so the 2 days leave is for this radiation will act on the cells when it is in active division phase at the M phase. When the cancer cells we should give time to for the cells to come to the M phase and
give 2 days rest radiation so that patient will come back to the active state. Okay. So what are the radio sensitivities?
Hyperbaric oxygen, high protein diet,
Okay. What?
blood transfusion, fresh blood
Blood
transfusion,
transfusion. Okay.
metronidazole, injection vitamin K,
Okay. Chemotherapeutic agents.
drugs, chemotherapy drugs.
Chemotherapy drug sensitizes tumor. Okay. Right then. Okay. What are the complications of irradiation?
Sir, radiation dermatitis, mucositis, perichondritis, loss of taste acuity, glossitis, strictures, laryngeal edema,
Laryngeal edema. Okay. Then. Stridor, focal cord fixity, transverse myelitis, then immunocompromised status. Okay. How will you take care of radiation-induced decreased saliva? You give artificial saliva, but that is very costly. How will you induce salivation? You can give the patient small balls of something which will increase the salivation, like citrus fruits. Okay, you take this orange candy, take it into small balls and keep it on the tongue. Or if the patient is can't take sweets, then you can take tamarind, make it into a small balls and keep it on the tongue. Then to keep the oral cavity clean, you got to take slices of pineapple, keep it in the fridge, take it out, put it in your mouth and keep munching it. Keep munching it. That will clean the teeth as well as increase the salivation. You can't swallow it, you can't crush it. Just keep biting it. Okay. So this will increase the salivation. Shave. Laryngeal edema will cause what we call the fixation of the cricoid joint. And if the patient who already have a paracardic space involvement, sudden increase in the bulk of the tumor will cause involvement of the thyropharyngeal muscle. Okay. Right then. Okay, this patient with the vocal cord fixity, if you want to do a surgery, what surgery you do?
If it's a vocal cord fixity, sir, we can do a partial laryngectomy to partial pharyngectomy.
What we can do? What you will do?
Sir, near total laryngectomy with partial pharyngectomy, sir.
Near total laryngectomy. Why not supratracheal?
One side of supratracheal. So near total, we can aid the speech.
There will be a tracheostomy.
So there will be tracheostomy, sir, but we can aid the speech for the patient. The quality of speech in near total laryngotomy is good. But if we do suprabrachial, we should do any
When a paraglottic space is involved, it is very difficult to do a suprachial. Always for near total. It's a any laryngeal involvement. Complete larynx is involved. So you got to go for near total only, or we do a total laryngectomy with the partial pharyngectomy. Okay. Are you sure of your lower extent clearance?
By CT scan, we can be sure.
CT scan or MRI?
CT is for CT can also decide. We can decide the lower extent by CT.
MRI will tell you the lower extent better. Another investigation we have missed is the PET CT for secondaries. If you don't screen for secondaries, you got to do a abdominal ultrasound. You got to do a whole body scan. Okay, so PET CT is better investigation to look for secondaries in other areas. Okay, so how will you do the surgery? How will you do the surgery steps?
First, for this near total laryngectomy, total laryngectomy.
I am bothered about pyriform sinus.
Sir, external approach, internal approach, sir. Internal approach is where
you told me about total laryngectomy with the partial laryngectomy.
Yes, sir. Total the skin.
Or near total laryngectomy. Will you do neck dissection or not?
Yes, sir.
What neck dissection?
It's a modified radical neck dissection on the involved side.
Modified radical neck dissection on involved side. What type?
So type 3.
Type 3 is what?
Sparing sternocleidomastoid muscle, internal jugular vein, and spinal accessory nerve.
3 you want to spare. You want to spare, right?
Sir?
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If there is a 4 centimeter node, then what do you do? Level 3 node, 4 centimeter. What surgery you do?
Modified radical mass.
Which type?
Sir, I will do type 3 only.
Still type 3. It's 4 centimeter node will be infiltrating on the interjugular vein. Still will you preserve interjugular vein, or will you take out the interjugular vein?
I will take out, sir. Type 2.
Type 2. Okay. So when you do what's the difference between a radical neck dissection and a MRND?
In MRND, there are 2-3 types. We are sparing the internal jugular vein.
Why you want to spare interjugular vein? Take it.
Sir, sir?
Knock it off. What will happen? When you remove the interjugular vein, what is the problem?
Sir, facial unilateral facial stasis.
When you remove the interjugular vein, there is a 2-fold increase in the ICT. Okay. Then the interjugular vein can sometimes be a bilateral. Sometimes one will be dominant, other will be very small. If you are removing the dominant one, it's almost like removing it on both sides. So there will be a 5-fold increase in the ICT. So patient will develop severe headache, and patient will develop brain edema, patient will develop facial puffiness. Okay. So you should always try to preserve the interjugular vein. Okay. What are the other structure which is preserved?
Sternocleidomastoid muscle and spinal accessory.
Why you want to preserve spinal accessory?
Sir, it's the main nerve supply of trapezius and
Sternocleidomastoid. If you injure that, what will happen?
sir, tortic stud.
Frozen shoulder. Treatment for frozen shoulder.
Sir,
What's the treatment for frozen shoulder?
physiotherapy,
hot water, hot wax bath, and set of massaging. Okay, so that will cause a frozen shoulder. If you don't, why you want to remove the sternocleidomastoid muscle?
sir, torticollis will be developed if the other sternocleidomastoid muscle is acting.
Not much. It's a cosmetic. When you remove one sternocleidomastoid, it looks ugly. The neck will look ugly, mainly for cosmetic. And why you remove is because of the access. With a better surgical techniques, you can always lift the sternocleidomastoid. You can strip off the deep fascia on the medial surface of sternocleidomastoid. Then put a loop, take it outwards again to remove deep of the fascia. So nowadays it's not always you remove the sternocleidomastoid muscle unless there is an infiltration by the tumor, infiltration by the node. Don't remove the sternocleidomastoid muscle. What are the absolute contraindications for neck dissection?
Prevertebral fascia and muscle invasion.
Okay. Why?
Sir,
Why?
sir, there will be neck rigidity. We cannot remove the whole tumor as such.
Cancer clearance is not possible confidently. So infiltration of the prevertebral fascial muscle, we can't give a cancer clearance. Second one,
Skull base infiltration.
skull base infiltration. When you have a level 2 node, it's a huge node infiltrating skull base, you can't give a cancer clearance. It will give a palliative surgery. Then third one is brachial plexus.
Brachial plexus.
Involvement of brachial plexus, you can't remove all these things, will go for an upper limb, whole thing will go for, doesn't worth giving a cancer surgery for that. So all other things are all relative contraindications like skin infiltration, infiltration to a sternocleidomastoid muscle, infiltration to a carotid. Even if you can do a carotid, you can do a carotid angiogram, see the infiltration, do a balloon occlusion test, you can resect that part of carotid and you can even put a graft. You can think of doing all these things, but not on these are all the absolute contraindication. Brachial plexus involvement, skull base invasion, and the prevertebral soft tissue invasion. These are all the absolute contraindications. So what incision you will do?
Sir,
How do you classify incisions for the neck?
sir,
How do you classify incision for the neck surgeries?
utility incision, modified head-shaped incision.
You divide that into a single line incision, double line incision, triradiate incision, and the 4-line incisions. Okay. Single line incision is horizontal skin piece incision or visor flap. This mastoid to this mastoid. You put a huge flap. Or you can do a glux orange incision with the flap incision. Or you can do a utility flaps like unilateral U or bilateral visor flap, or you put a hockey stick incision. These are all the single line incisions. A double line incision is called maxi. Okay. Triradiate incisions are start with your trial incisions and various modifications. Shopware, Conley, all these modifications. You have a vertical Y, horizontal Y, all the T-shaped incision, vertical T, horizontal T. All these things are all the triradiate incision where you have a 3-point junction. 4 incisions are Hayes-Martin. It's called H incision. The H incision can be a vertical H. You put 2 limbs along the anteroperculum and connect it. Or it can be a unilateral H. one along the posterior border, one along the anterior border, connect it in between. It's called vertical incision. Then you have an horizontal. One incision above, one incision below, and connect in between. These are all the various incisions used for neck dissection mainly, or the neck surgeries in the neck. Okay. So what incision you will put for this patient?
Sir, a Gluck-Sorensen incision.
Want to put a Gluck-Sorensen incision? Last laryngectomy, what incision you did?
Sir, I will do total laryngectomy.
What incision you did, man? Total laryngectomy.
Sir, Gluck-Sorensen incision from
No, last case, what incision you did?
low neck horizontal incision. Screen.
Incision. Okay, extend this above your sternocleidomastoid on the side of neck dissection. Okay, so that will make your neck dissection fine. Okay, or you can put a Gluck-Sorensen incision and get another extension lower down. Okay. So that will, then what do you do next? Plan. What structure you will concentrate first?
Sir,
Which one you will do first? You do the laryngectomy or you do the neck dissection?
It's a neck dissection followed by laryngectomy, sir.
Sir?
Sir, when we do neck dissection first, the structures will be, we can visualize the landmarks.
Always do a neck dissection first, because when you manipulate the tumor, there will be permeation. So you got to dissect the outward spread of the tumor by the lymphatics and the blood. So first thing you do is you ligate all the possible lymphatic spread ways. So you do a neck dissection first, and then you come for your primary tumor. Say, for example, if you remove all these structures, where will you leave these structures attached to?
Sir?
You remove all these structures, where do you leave these structures attached to? Do you take it out or leave the neck dissection attached to where?
Sir, to the specimen. I will take the neck node separately and send it for biopsy, sir.
You should not do that. Then do a mandible. To be attached to your primary tumor. You can't dissect that, take it out. You attach this all to your thyroid membrane and remove it along with the tumor. Once you have removed it, then you can just dissect, label it to 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever level it is, and then send for biopsy. Okay. So you don't take soft tissue separately. Okay. So first you do the neck dissection, then you go for primary tumor management. How will you reconstruct?
Sir, it's based on the remnant of pharyngeal wall remaining. If it's 1.5 centimeter in a relaxed state, and we can stretch it try stretching the remaining mucosa. If it's about 2.5 centimeter at the stretched position, we can primarily close the pharyngeal mucosa. If it's less than 2.5 centimeter, we can give flap correction. We can use radial forearm free flap, anterolateral thigh flap, and pectoralis major flap.
Pec major is not a free flap.
Pedicle flap.
What is Beckhamsian flap?
Sir?
What is Beckhamsian flap?
Beckhamsian.
So faciocutaneous flap. Deltopectoral flap. So the same deltopectoral flap, faciocutaneous flap, can be taken as a free flap. That fascia can be taken as free flap. Faciomuscular flap or a faciocutaneous flap can be taken as free flap and used as a microvascular flap. Okay, like an anterolateral thigh flap, you can take it from the neck. It's very, very nearby. Okay, you can take that and use it for whenever there is a requirement to very small. You can use it. Okay, if it goes inside the post-ligate area, submucosal spread up to the cricopharynx. Then what do you do? What's your option?
Total laryngectomy with the total laryngopharyngosesophageectomy with the gastric pull-up.
Total laryngopharyngosectomy with
Gastric pull-up.
okay. So how will you follow up this patient? What's your when you give a radiotherapy? What's your 5-year survival rate?
Sir, less than it's very less only. So less than 30 to 40% only. Hypopharyngeal growth.
T2 lesion. Do you know anyone who has got a very famous person who has got a hypopharyngeal tumor and got irradiated and been there for a long time? There was a time we used to see him every day. Cricketer. You watch cricket? Cricket commentator. Englishman. Jeffrey Boycott. 5-year survival rate is close to about 40 to 60%. Okay. So, how will you follow the patient?
Sir, for the first year, every 2 to 3 months follow up by clinical examination and CT9.
No, I am not discussing anything about larynx because tomorrow we are going to have a larynx. Okay. Then.
And on the second year, we can follow up for about 4 to 6 months. For the third year, we can follow up for about 6 to 8 months, and after that, a yearly follow up.
6 months. Why 6 to 8 months? How do you follow up 8 months 2 times a year?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. And what are the signs of recurrence?
Recurrent growth symptoms and recurrent growth. Note.
Look for nodes, look for spread, and look for local area. Do a laryngoscopic examination or a video laryngoscopic examination. Look for area. How long you think this edema will subside?
Sir, it may take up to 6 months, 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months. Sure? You stay for 2 years. Okay. The persistence of edema is sign of what?
Sir?
Persistence of edema is sign of what?
Residual
tumor. So always you should suspect a residual tumor whenever there is a presence of edema for a long duration. Okay. Shall we finish? Shall we finish? Any other questions anybody wants to ask? Shiva, you please exit from the your screen sharing.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I have enabled unmute option for the audience for interaction. They can unmute and.
I think it's a very good presentation, but the trick is that recently they did a symposium on the hypopharyngeal growth, so that made them more familiar with the presentation. But for a second year postgraduate, he has done it extremely well. So anyone who has got a doubt can ask your questions.
Sir, which book should we read for decision making in hypopharyngeal malignancy?
What difference that makes? Scott Bone gives you the beautiful description of what you do. But the important thing is what you do in your center is what is important. There will be an internal examiner. The internal examiner should agree with what right? When you tell something what is the internal examiner is not familiar with or internal examiner is not used to doing, he might not agree with you. So the examination is to find out whether you know what is done in your place. That is more important. Okay, so very good books are there. For example, you can use a Stellenmoren. There's a book called Batsaki, but the latest edition has not yet come. Stellenmoren is also a little old. The best books available today are Cummings and the Scott Brown. Okay, that is for the latest you should know. And there is another book by Sultan Pradhan. That's for the larynx. So these are all the very good books available. Scott Brown gives you the good amount of latest things that happen because the book is very latest. Anything? Any other questions?
No more questions from the audience, sir.
Yes, that's not glance root. It's a Gallen's loop. Gallen's loop is the anastomosis between the superior sensory branches of superior laryngeal nerve and the recurrent laryngeal nerve occurs at the piriform sinus. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. We had a very extensive discussion on pharyngeal tumors for today. So even the presenter was very confident, and he would, as you said, maybe they already had exposure recently, but for a second year, he did very well, sir, as far as I can say. So we'll be meeting again tomorrow and day after tomorrow for interesting cases of laryngeal growths. So we'll see you again at same time, 8 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you all.
Yeah, but Friday having we have a surgical oncologist group having a small conference on thyroid malignancies. So I'm doing I'm a panelist there. So that starts around 7:30. So we'll have this session on the Friday at 6:30.
Okay, sir. We'll change accordingly.
Okay, right. On Friday, the last day we'll have it at 6:30. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for giving your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.